Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Dally, and this week I'm sharing a new short story I wrote called What's Your Spirit Animal? And as is often the case, which happened with this story as well, is that my initial concept for the story is completely different to what actually ended up for the story itself, like with the plot. And that just happens a lot when I go and first think of an idea, and then when I actually go and flesh out the idea, I realize that with this one in particular, that it wasn't necessarily like the message I wanted to get across. And also, it was kind of leading to a dead end. It was just kind of a concept, but not like a full-on plot. So then once I actually fleshed it out, I realized, so this is where I can take this. So this is what it turned out to be. So here we go. Without further ado, it's story time. The chill sweeping through the nighttime air added a collective feeling of excitement, wrapped up in a nervous energy as the girls followed one another throughout the darkness with nothing but a pair of flashlights bouncing against the bare branches. "Stay close, girls," said Nancy, one of the two troop leaders guiding them through the woods. "We're almost there." It seemed so silly. How did she know they were almost there? They were in the middle of the woods. Where exactly was there? That's right, it was the sheer ridiculous nature of that comment, certainly not their rising nervousness, that made a couple of the girls giggle, the sound blending in with their hurried footsteps crunching over dead leaves. When they finally reached there, again, wherever there actually was, Nancy shines the flashlight down an empty dirt path, and another indescribable chill had the girls clutching onto each other more closely, out of excitement, assuredly, not fear, even as Nancy explained what they'd walked all the way out here to do. "One at a time," she said, "you'll each walk this path through the woods, and as you do, you're to focus on everything around you, the bushes, the wind, all of nature, to connect to that deep part of yourself, and perhaps even discover something you may not have even known about yourself." Murmurs of disbelief dispersed throughout the group, and the whisperings didn't let up as Nancy herself headed down the path, the light from the flashlight growing smaller and smaller as she walked away. The other troop leader, Denise, broke the whispers with her resolute, matronly voice. "Now, girls," she said, "it's normal to feel scared, but Nancy didn't go far, and I'll be right here if you need me." Her words should have calmed their combined fears of what to expect on a lone walk through the dark woods, but they only seemed to cement their dread, even more so when she asked, "Who wants to go first?" The girls all exchanged glances. Of course, it was difficult for any of them to see one another, what with the only source of light being the flashlight in Denise's hand. The rustling as they turned their heads and stared with wide eyes confirmed that no one dared willingly offer to go first. That is, until one of the girls, Alexa, who was already at the front of the line, said, "I will." "Go on, dear," Denise said. It was thankfully the gentle coaxing they all needed, as she didn't sound demanding nor nagging, but rather encouraging. The dozen pairs of eyes all turned to Alexa, and the attention spurred her. Her shoulders went back, her head went up, and her eyes went forward. And with that she took the first step, and then another, each step growing more certain than the one before. When she saw the small circle of light coming from Nancy's flashlight, she smiled and walked a bit more briskly, at last meeting her at the end of the path. Next was Cindy, who kept her hands to her sides, her pounding heart the only sound louder to her than her careful footsteps. Her nervousness seemed to melt away with each step she took, until it vanished entirely when she reached Alexa and Nancy, the latter of whom welcoming her with a proud grin. After her was Tiana, who refused to blink even once the entire time she walked, turning her head here and there and spotting a rock or a patch of leaves. One by one the rest of the girls went, some walking more quickly than others, more eager to finish the walk and return to the group as fast as possible. A few others, however, savored their silent, solitary walk, even admiring what little could be seen in such darkness, like the thin branches poking out, as if beckoning fingertips curving toward them in gentle, comforting greeting. When the last girl completed the walk, all of them seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, as their spirits restored and they broke into chattering, reassurances to one another that they weren't scared at all. "And so you see," Nancy said, "whatever you may have feared walking this path by yourselves, it wasn't so scary once you actually completed it, wasn't it? It was actually pretty fun, Alexis said, and the other girls nodded in agreement. I'm so happy to hear that, Nancy said. And one last thing I want you all to think about is, as you were walking, taking in nature, what animal did you feel like? This sent the group abuzz, as voices overlapped with intrigued thoughts and wonders of such a concept. Some shouted answers right away. A horse, majestic and strong. A rabbit, quick and alert. A gazelle, graceful and light in its footsteps. We can discuss more in the morning, Nancy said as she began to lead the way back to the cabin. Now the girls couldn't help noticing the path seemed not only shorter, but not scary in the slightest, having each walked it by themselves. A rattling in a tree didn't incite fear, or the howling of the wind, or the sound of insects chirping somewhere in the distance. None of it was scary. They were all too caught up in discussing their animals, though Tiana, ever the observer, was the first to notice Nancy's change in countenance, her smile slipping from her features. Nancy stopped in her tracks and turned the flashlight to each side. Slowly the other girls began to pick up on the sense of alarm creeping like the slow scraping of nails, searing into each of them. It set in when Nancy turned to them and asked, "Girls, has anyone seen Denise?" They all exchanged worried looks, eyes alight with the terror they'd crushed so resolutely mere moments ago, only to come back full force now. "She told me she'd meet us," said Christina, the last of the group to go, and panic struck like a lightning bolt as the rest of the girls voiced their fears. "She must have gotten lost. What if she's stuck somewhere? Maybe she's hurt." "Everyone, let's all relax," Nancy said in as pacifying a tone she could muster in spite of her own worries rushing to the surface, threatening to burst through and sending them all into chaos. "We'll find her." They set off in their search, and with no technology at their hands, they had only the wilderness to direct them where to go. Alexa, the fearless leader of the group, straightened her back and stuck out her shoulder blades, her ears perking up. She paid closer attention to their surroundings, feeling the earth beneath her feet. Her spirit animal overtook her in that moment, a mighty lioness. Cindy, meanwhile, grew meek and frantic like a mouse, with blood-red eyes and a twitching nose. She clung to one of the other girls, her best friend Shannon, who only quickened her pace, ears pointed back, shoulders down, much like a fox. Then there was Tiana, whose eyes seemed to grow round and wide, glowing like the moon, her stance tall, as though she would sprout wings and take off like her spirit animal, an owl. The girls who tapped into their prey spirit animals scoped the area wherever Nancy shined the flashlight, paying attention to any possible dangers, a broken branch, a hole in the ground. The girls with predator spirit animals tapped into their own instincts, thinking out possible scenarios of where Denise could have taken a wrong turn or possibly gotten injured. As the night grew still, each one of them possessed a unique strength, whether strong intuitiveness, or sharp observance, or quick thinking and determination. And finally they heard the familiar voice, an inquisitive noise. "Girls?" "Denise?" Nancy said as she moved the flashlight in the direction of the sound. "There!" said Alexa, pointing ahead. At last they came face to face with Denise, her hands and knees on the ground. They cried in relief and swarmed around her, helping her to her feet as they all spoke at once. "Are you okay? We thought you got hurt. You scared us." "I'm okay," Denise assured them. My flashlight slipped from my hand as I was heading toward you all. Then I went down to get it and couldn't find it, and I crawled further and further into the woods. But everything's fine now, thanks to all of you. You found me." "We used our spirit animal instincts," said one of the girls, and they all giggled. "Well," Nancy said, laughing herself, almost giddy with how relieved she was now that this ordeal was over. "I think we'll all have a good night's rest after tonight's excitement." The excited chattering went on as they all headed back, and as the cabin came into view, the troop leaders exchanged a glance and a sly wink, while the crickets chirped cheerfully, as if in celebration of everyone's newfound confidence. All right, that was What's Your Spirit Animal? So my initial idea for this, well, actually, this is a true story. The idea for this story came from years ago at Girl Scout camp. We did this. We had to actually, one at a time, walk through the woods by ourselves, and it was just so terrifying at the time. I don't know how old I was, maybe 10 or 11 or so. And we had to do other exercises as well, but this was one of them where we just had to walk a short distance by ourselves and just focus on nature and then focus on what kind of animal we felt like. And I believe I said that I felt like a deer, just kind of quiet and alert. And I remember other people like saying things like, oh, I don't know, and just kind of making things up on the spot, like tiger, jaguar, rabbit, just any animal that they felt like in that moment when you're just by yourself in nature. And I just remember like the fear, but then like the more you were walking, it just kind of felt soothing in a way, because all you could hear is just your own footsteps and just pitch darkness for the most part. And it was really maybe only 30-second walk or so, because then you just get to the other side with the other girls and everything. And with the person holding, I think she had a lantern, actually, not a flashlight. But so that stuck with me, and then I figured, what's your spirit animal? So my initial idea for this was going to be them literally turning into their spirit animal, and it was going to coincide basically with growing up in a way. And then I thought about, well, is this going to be just these girls that it happens to? And then if so, would people kind of want them to be like, would they be treated different? Like, oh, they're animals now, they're not human, things like that. Then I was like, well, I don't want to really go in that direction. I want it to be, what's your spirit animal, what you feel like, since it's supposed to be a confidence booster. And that's what that is, your spirit animal, your true identity in a way, close to your personality. And every animal has its own strengths, see, whether it's prey or predator, whether it's a small animal, a big animal. So then each of them using their skills and working together as a group. So, and then I had the little tiny twist at the end where they kind of wink at each other like this was their plan all along. And then I figured, let me not have one of the actual girls get lost. That would be horrifying. So just that, they just tricked him a little bit, Denise pretending like she was lost or whatever. But then that was the thing, them coming together despite their fear. And the whole thing with that, something may seem scary at first, but then when you actually do it, you realize it wasn't that scary at all. So all of that. And I know it's a little on the short side, but what are you going to do? And with that, that is going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Storytelling Saga, as well as on Twitter at Storytell Saga. You can also send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by leaving me a message in the contact section of storytellingsaga.com or by sending me an email at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next week, you are a thing of beauty and a joy forever. I will be discussing Little Women. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.